Now with FIFA 20, the video game dropping this week, I'm going to be discussing what would it look like if the Canadian Premier League teams and players were in the FIFA 20 video game. We're going to discuss it all right here, right now, and then let's get started. So if you're joining me for the first time, hello, welcome, I'm Curtis, and this is my channel, A.F.C. Curtis, your home for all things Canadian Premier League soccer content right here on YouTube. So definitely if you want to see more content just like this, maybe consider hitting that red subscribe button. And this video here is going to be super cool and super fun. I've spent the last couple months kind of doing my little researches here and there and building it because this is something special. Unfortunately, the Canadian Premier League's players and teams aren't in the FIFA 20 edition of the video game from EA Sports, which is a Canadian-based company, so it's kind of funny that they don't even have their hometown league in it yet. But I am excited to just bring you what I think the overalls of all these players would be in the Canadian Premier League. And now this video is just kind of an entry into it. If you want to dig deeper in it, over on my social media channels throughout this entire week, I'll be dropping just the overalls of every single player on every single team for all 7 of the teams, so I'm pretty excited about that. So definitely check that out over at A.F.C. Curtis on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. But now let's do the general positions, the top players in all the positions in the Canadian Premier League. Now let's get that thing started with the goalkeeping. So here we go with the goalkeepers of the Canadian Premier League. My top 5 here, you got Henry there kicking off the list with 61 overall. Coming at number 5, you got Williams from the Halifax Wanderers, 62 overall goalkeeper there at number 4. And in the top 3 is pretty much the consistent top 3 goalkeepers in the Canadian Premier League. There's no surprises in the top 3 there. You got Connor James coming at number 3 at 63 overall. That's a pretty good overall. And you know, you got Nate Ingham there at 64 overall, who's looked really good for York 9, at least in the first half of the year. This last half of the year he's kind of looked a little bit inconsistent, and you know, I think he's not really the star in the fall season. It's probably more Ryan Telfer, who we'll touch on in a minute here. But of course, topping the goalkeeper list and one of the best players right now in the Canadian Premier League has got to be a 65 overall player, and that is Marco Carducci, who was just recently called up to the Canadian men's national team, which fits because if you look at the FIFA 20 predictions there in terms of the Canadian keepers there, he would rank as one of the top 3 Canadian keepers in the world right now. So I think, you know, Marco Carducci definitely deserves that 65 overall and definitely deserves to top this list. Time to get to the defenders. The guys are going to stop you from trying to get those breakaways and those 2-on-1s in those FIFA video games, and there's 5 really good defenders here. You know, starting it off as a 9 stripes defender, Luca Gasparotto, 63 overall, looked really solid there this season so far. And the top 4 all tied at first place with 64 overall. Blake Smith from PFC's looked really good. You know, we got David Edgar, who just a year or 2 ago in FIFA was like a 66, 67 overall. So I think, you know, his overall has been kind of coming down. I think a 64 overall right now is probably a good place for him. And of course, you got Zader and Didic, probably arguably the 2 best defenders, I think, right now in the Canadian Premier League, both at 64 overall. You can kind of make a case for either one of them to potentially even be a 65 overall. But I think for right now, 64 overall for both of them, it's pretty even, it's pretty fair, and I think it's really good, especially coming down the last month or so of the season. So now time for the magicians in the midfield here. You got Bustos, number 5 with a 64 overall, is done really good, real killer for Valor FC. You got Ryan Telfer at number 4 with 64 overall. I think if you can finish off the season strong, I think he deserves a 65 overall, I really do. You know, he's looked really good this season, especially recently for the 9 stripes. Julian Boucher there has had a really good run of form this summer in the last 2-3 months, deserves that 65 overall because of it. Start of the year I would have put him at a 62, 63, which is the last time he was featured in a FIFA video game a little while ago. And of course Tristan Borges, 65 overall, definitely deserves it. He's had a killer of a year himself. He's one of the top players in the Canadian Premier League now, and if he can finish strong, maybe he could eventually develop into a 66, 67 overall by the end of the season. Who knows, depending on his form, right? And then you got, you know, Kyle Becker, who to me is the highest rated player in the Canadian Premier League, coming in at a 67 overall, and he's done really well for himself for Forge FC. He's the league leader in assists, and he's been really a great leader on and off the pitch, I think, for Forge FC, and done really solid work there. So I think 67 overall is what he deserves. He's in the prime of his career, and you know, going back to, I guess, in the research part of it all, about the last time he was in a FIFA video game was maybe 2 seasons ago, and he was a 66 overall with a 68 overall potential, if I'm not mistaken. So 67 overall is nice little bump for him, I think, right now. Maybe even a 68 overall, depending on how the season ends. But I think he deserves that top spot. Now, to end things off, a really interesting note here is the forwards. A 5-way finish for first place. I have 5 guys I think have been pretty good forwards here in the Canadian Premier League. Dioc, 64 overall. You know, I definitely think that he's a good player. He's got 6 goals in the league, one of the top goal scorers. But I think besides goals, he's done really well. Positioning's looking really good for the Eddies there for him. I think he's their best forward. You know, you got Petrasso, 64 overall. You know, I think if he was healthy and he played a little bit more games this season for Valor FC, I think he could be a 65 overall. I really do. I think he's a talented playmaker. He's a talented player in general, and he's a really good player in the Canadian Premier League overall. I think he's one of the top players down the line. If he was healthy all the time, he could be one of the top players in the Canadian Premier League, and maybe even crack an MLS lineup in the next year or two. On top of that, you got, you know, Victor Blasco, who, you know, he's had some really good run of form, especially, you know, at the end of the spring season and throughout the summer here for PFC. One of the top players and on PFC there and in the league possibly. So 64 overall, number 3 right there. You got Gatas there, York 9 striker, 64 overall, one of the top goal scorers as well, top 4 in the league as of the recording of this video. I mean, he deserves that spot as one of the guys, and ultimately you can even say Gatas maybe even deserves a 65 overall. I believe the last time he was in a FIFA video game was a year or 2 ago as well, and that was at about a 63 overall, 64 overall. So you could almost, you know, he kind of is in his prime of his career, so 64 overall is reasonable. I think even 65, you know, is definitely a legitimate thing. So I think 65 overall for Gatas. And you know what, as I'm talking myself into this, I'm going to bump him up. 65 overall for Gatas, right there for the 9 stripes. And on top of that, you know, number 1 was Terran Campbell, 64 overall, but I'm going to bump him up to a 65 overall myself because he is that good of a player. And I don't even know why I put him at a 64 overall. He's one of the league leaders in goals at 10. And he's just been a total package for PFC. He's been really good there with Victor Blasco up front. So I think Terran Campbell, Gatas, 2-way tie for first place, 65 overall for those 2 players. So I'm bumping them up there from a 64 to 65 overall. Forget what I said. That's where it is. Those are the 2 best forwards in the CPL, and those are my rankings. Well, guys, those were my rankings for the Canadian Premier League. If they were in FIFA 20, let me know if those overall ratings are what you believe the overall rating should be for those CPL players. Do you think Becker deserves a 67 overall? What about, you know, Campbell or Gatas or even Borges? Do they deserve the 65 overall rankings? Just let me know down in the comment section below. And of course, if you like this video, definitely hit that thumbs up button. That like button shows me like content just like this. And of course, if you want to see more content just like this, definitely consider hitting that red subscribe button as well as that little bell notification button so you can get notified each and every week I drop a brand new episode just like this one right here on YouTube. But you can also watch my content if you're not always on YouTube. You can check me out over at the FotMob app in the news section of the Canadian Premier League section of that app, of course, as the northernstarting11.com. I'm over there, so you can check out my content along with a bunch of other great vidcasts as well as podcasts, all made by Canadians for Canadians and really just for the soccer world in general. So check them out there. The link for that website is down in the description below. And until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching.